In the heart of West Africa, a voice is rising not from the halls of parliament, not from political campaigns, but from the streets, the markets, the schools, and even the fields of Burkina Faso. Ordinary citizens' mothers carrying baskets of cement, students laying paving stones, soldiers working side by side with the people have all declared something few in the world ever expected to hear. We don't want elections. We want to build our nation. This is not a slogan. It is not propaganda. It is a cry that shakes the very foundations of how we think about democracy and development. For decades, Africa has been told by international powers and local politicians alike that progress could only come through elections, foreign aid, and billion-dollar contracts signed in secret boardrooms. But today in Burkina Faso, citizens are tearing down that script. They are rejecting the endless cycle of promises and power struggles. Instead, they are rallying around a new vision, one called Fasume, which simply means, let's build our nation. Launched by President Ibrahim Traoré in October 2024, Fasume is not just a government program. It is a revolution in thinking. It mobilizes the strength of the people, their skills, their sweat, their resources, without waiting for permission from abroad or excuses from politicians. And in this extraordinary moment, the citizens themselves are asking, what matters more, elections or real development? For those of us watching from afar, especially here in America, the question strikes deep. Could it be that a poor, landlocked nation in Africa is teaching the world a new lesson about sovereignty and progress? Could it be that democracy, as we've always defined it, is not enough? Before we answer, we must listen carefully to the people of Burkina Faso. Their story is unfolding now, and it may reshape the future of an entire continent. Please share this video if you believe true progress comes from action, not empty promises. And subscribe if you feel the truth of Ibrahim Traoré's movement is more important than the headlines. The story begins not in the chambers of political parties, but on the streets of Ouagadougou, Kaya, and dozens of other towns across Burkina Faso. Something unusual, even historic, has taken place. Citizens in their thousands have spoken with one voice. We don't want elections. At first glance, it seems unthinkable. For decades, the narrative imposed on African nations was clear democracy equals ballots, elections, and political campaigns. But in 2025, Burkina Faso is breaking that pattern. Citizens are openly rejecting the idea of an election, rejecting speeches about political power, and even rejecting discussions about whether President Ibrahim Traoré should remain in office or step aside. Their message is direct and unshakable focus on development, not politics. Why this sudden shift? The answer lies in a program that has captured the imagination of the nation, Fasume, a phrase in Marais meaning, let's build our nation. Launched officially in October 2024, Fasume is not merely a policy, it is a people's movement. It calls on Burkinabé at home and abroad to stop waiting for foreign aid, to stop relying on international loans, and to start building their country with their own hands, resources, and creativity. From the very beginning, the signs of change were everywhere. Heavy machinery worth over 200 billion CFA francs, bulldozers, graders, concrete mixers were mobilized not by foreign companies, but by the state and its people. Citizens in villages began volunteering their labor. Soldiers off-duty from security missions reported to construction sites. Women in local markets pooled their earnings to donate bags of cement. Even children in schools were learning practical skills, how to lay paving stones, how to build simple infrastructure, how to contribute directly to the physical growth of their country. The Fasume initiative quickly became more than infrastructure. It became a mirror reflecting the priorities of the nation. While ordinary citizens, students, soldiers, and even government ministers worked side by side mixing concrete and laying foundations, something else was happening in the political world. Politicians, those outside Traoré's transitional government, were absent. They did not donate. They did not appear at work sites. They did not call for solidarity. Instead, their energy went into planning future elections, lobbying for a return to the old system, and positioning themselves for power. This contrast was impossible for the people to ignore. In May 2025, Burkina Faso's ministers themselves donated tons of cement and joined construction crews in Ouagadougou. The image of leaders in uniforms and business suits pushing wheelbarrows alongside ordinary laborers sent shockwaves across the country. It proved that leadership could mean more than speeches, it could mean sweat. Yet at the same time, the traditional politicians continued to focus on election dates, campaign strategies, and the struggle for authority. That was the breaking point. Citizens began to ask difficult questions. Were these not the same politicians who once declared that military men cannot govern? If so, how is it that the military under Ibrahim Traoré was delivering more schools, hospitals, roads, and clean water than decades of elected officials ever managed? If development is the real measure of leadership, then what good are elections that produce only corruption and broken promises? Videos emerged from across Burkina Faso showing citizens speaking plainly to cameras, "Do not come to us with election talk. Do not gather us for campaign meetings. We want development, not elections." This was not propaganda from the government. It was grassroots frustration boiling into clarity. For many, the evidence was undeniable. Fasume had exposed a truth: politicians were focused on themselves, while the people and the government under Traoré were focused on the nation. This groundswell of rejection turned what could have been a debate about politics into a collective stand. It was no longer a battle of Traoré versus the politicians. It was now the people versus the politicians. And in that shift lies the true weight of the event. Burkina Faso is not simply postponing an election, it is redefining the meaning of democracy itself, replacing ballots with bricks, slogans with cement bags, and political rallies with construction sites. In the words of one citizen captured on video, "When we are finished building with our own hands, you politicians will want to come and take power over what we created. We will not allow it. No elections. No. Development first." The turning point came when Fasume was no longer just a government call, it became a lived reality visible in every town and village. Citizens who once felt powerless now stood tall because they were literally rebuilding their own country. The sound of hammers and cement mixers echoed louder than political speeches. And then came the moment of climax: the people began openly rejecting politicians. This rejection was not whispered in private rooms. It was shouted in public squares, recorded on cell phones, and spread across social media. In videos that circulated nationwide, ordinary Burkinabe declared, "Do not bring us elections. Do not gather to talk about campaigns. Do not speak about whether Captain Traoré stays or leaves. We want roads, hospitals, schools. We want development." That single message struck harder than any campaign rally. For the first time in living memory, the people were no longer waiting for permission, they were giving orders to the political class. It was a complete reversal of roles. Instead of politicians shaping public opinion, the citizens themselves were drawing the line and dictating the agenda. The contrast between soldiers and politicians became sharper still. Images of women donating cement, school children laying paving stones, and government ministers pushing wheelbarrows in the dust were powerful. They symbolized a nation in motion. Meanwhile, traditional politicians were seen in conference halls talking about elections, legal frameworks, and campaign strategies. This gulf between builders and talkers ignited the anger of the people, and the reaction was immediate. Crowds that once listened to campaign promises now booed when elections were mentioned. Meetings organized by politicians drew suspicion, even hostility. Citizens interrupted speeches demanding to know why these men and women had not donated a single bag of cement or spent a single hour on the construction sites. In their eyes, legitimacy now came from labor, not ballots. The Fasume initiative revealed an uncomfortable truth: the old political elite thrived on elections because elections gave them access to power and resources. But without development to show, their words rang hollow. As one citizen put it bluntly, "Through elections you looted us. Through Fasume we build ourselves." Internationally, whispers began to spread. Analysts asked, what does it mean if a population willingly rejects elections? For Western governments and NGOs that had long promoted electoral democracy as the gold standard, Burkina Faso's uprising was a challenge. Could it be that people preferred tangible progress over abstract freedoms? Could it be that development had become a stronger currency than ballots? Inside the country, the emotions were raw. Pride swelled as Burkinabe pointed to new roads, new markets, and new schools rising from their own contributions. Anger boiled against politicians who seemed intent on dragging the nation back to old habits. And beneath it all, there was a growing sense of unity. Military, civil servants, women's associations, youth groups, and ordinary families, all aligned against a small class of elites. The climax was not a single day or a single speech. It was the slow, visible realization that the balance of power had shifted. The people themselves became the defenders of Captain Traoré's mandate, not because of ideology, but because of results. Every paved street, every new hospital wing, every classroom built under Fasume became a silent argument against elections. The world had rarely seen such a thing. Elections are often celebrated as the pinnacle of democracy, yet here was a nation saying, "Not now. We choose development first." Burkina Faso was not just resisting its politicians, it was resisting a global narrative. And in doing so, it revealed a truth that resonated far beyond its borders when citizens witness real progress. With their own eyes, they will not trade it for empty promises. This was the high point of the movement, the moment when a poor, landlocked nation shouted to the world that bricks and mortar meant more than ballots and microphones. And the world, stunned, began to take notice. The decision of ordinary Burkinabe to turn their backs on elections in favor of the Fasume initiative has triggered consequences that reach into every corner of society and politics. What began as a grassroots movement of construction and solidarity has become a force reshaping the nation's very identity. On the civil front, there is a new spirit of unity that many describe as unprecedented. Families who once debated politics around dinner tables now speak about which project site they can contribute to on weekends. Women's associations that once lobbied for politicians now organize donations of cement and food for volunteers. Even school curriculums are changing, with children being taught not just academic lessons but practical skills: paving stones, planting trees, building classrooms. This is no longer charity. It is citizenship in action. The result is a growing sense that development is not something the government delivers, but something every citizen owns. That ownership has deeply altered public trust. For years, faith in institutions was collapsing across Burkina Faso. Corruption scandals, broken promises, and endless election cycles eroded people's hope. But Fasume has reversed that trend. When citizens see soldiers carrying shovels or ministers sweating under the sun beside ordinary workers, it signals something profound. The distance between rulers and ruled is shrinking. Legitimacy is no longer tied to ballots, but to participation and sacrifice. Politically, the consequences are even sharper. Traditional politicians, the very ones pushing for a return to elections, now find themselves isolated. Their absence on construction sites has branded them as outsiders to the national project. In the eyes of the people, they are not builders, but looters waiting for their next chance. This public perception has destroyed much of their credibility. Campaign speeches about democracy fall flat when compared to the tangible progress of new roads, hospitals, and schools. The military-led government under Ibrahim Traoré has in turn gained unprecedented strength, not by suppressing dissent with force, but by aligning itself with the people's priorities. Every kilometer of road paved, every new market hall constructed becomes a political shield. Citizens are defending the government's mandate themselves, saying openly, "Do not disturb us with elections. Let us finish building first." In this sense, Traoré's administration has transformed the political landscape. It is no longer military versus civilians. It is builders versus talkers, action versus rhetoric. This realignment has also raised profound questions about the future of democracy in Africa. If elections no longer command legitimacy, what replaces them? For Burkina Faso, the answer seems to be results-driven governance, where legitimacy flows from development rather than votes. But this raises uncomfortable debates. Some warned that sidelining elections risks entrenching power indefinitely, as seen in other parts of the continent. Others argue that the Burkinabe case proves the opposite, that when leaders genuinely deliver, people themselves become the guardians of accountability. Civil society itself is undergoing transformation. NGOs that once campaigned for electoral processes now find themselves shifting focus to community projects. Religious leaders preach about the holiness of labor and unity. Even diaspora communities abroad are reimagining their role, sending remittances not for families alone, but for national infrastructure. Yet these changes are not without tension. The political class, though weakened, is not gone. They see their influence shrinking and are likely to resist, perhaps even sabotage, in hopes of regaining power. This sets the stage for possible clashes between old institutions and new realities. But for now, the momentum is firmly with the people. In short, Burkina Faso is living through a civil and political revolution without a single gunshot. Citizens are rediscovering dignity through work, politicians are being stripped of their masks, and a young leader is redefining what power means. The consequences are immense. A country once seen as unstable is now building not just roads and markets, but a new social contract, one where development, not elections, is the measure of legitimacy. From Washington to Brussels, from Paris to Addis Ababa, the message coming out of Burkina Faso has unsettled many. For decades, the dominant narrative promoted by Western governments and institutions was simple democracy equals elections. Aid loans and international legitimacy were tied to ballot boxes. But now a small landlocked country has flipped the script. Its citizens are openly rejecting elections and instead rallying around bulldozers, cement bags, and volunteer labor. To the outside world, it is both shocking and confusing. In the United States, analysts are divided. On one hand, there is concern. American policymakers fear that Burkina Faso's rejection of elections could set a precedent in Africa, encouraging other nations to sidestep electoral systems. For Washington, this challenges decades of foreign policy investments where billions of dollars were poured into promoting electoral frameworks across the continent. Skeptics warn if Fasume succeeds, it could undermine America's moral authority to promote democracy abroad. On the other hand, some American observers see an uncomfortable truth. Ordinary Burkinabe are not rejecting democracy because they want dictatorship. They are rejecting a hollow version of democracy that has delivered little but corruption and division. To older Americans who lived through the New Deal or the rebuilding after World War II, the sight of citizens uniting to physically construct their nation strikes a chord. It reminds them of an era when progress was measured in bridges built and jobs created, not just in ballots cast. For these voices, Fasume offers a lesson: development and dignity cannot be postponed in the name of procedure. In Europe, the reaction has been sharper. France, once the colonial power in Burkina Faso, views the rejection of elections with alarm. French media frame it as a dangerous slide into authoritarianism. Yet beneath the criticism lies another fear: the loss of influence. If Burkina Faso proves it can develop without Western loans or corporations, the very foundation of France's leverage in West Africa crumbles. Across Africa, however, the story resonates differently. In Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya, citizens watch closely. They know the frustration of seeing elections held every 4 or 5 years only for corruption to grow and youth unemployment to soar. The Burkinabe example poses a provocative question to neighboring societies. What if ballots are not the only path to legitimacy? What if development itself is the truest democracy? At the African Union, diplomats whisper cautiously. Some fear that endorsing Burkina Faso's model could undermine continental institutions built around electoral standards. Others quietly admire Traoré's audacity. For young Africans, especially in the Sahel, the message is: electrifying sovereignty can be built from within with sweat and solidarity rather than borrowed from abroad. Global NGOs and human rights groups remain skeptical. They argue that sidelining elections could erode freedoms in the long run. But even among them, there is recognition that Burkina Faso is exposing a painful reality. Elections alone do not guarantee justice, prosperity, or dignity. Without real development, democracy is an empty shell. For the United States, the dilemma is profound. Should Washington condemn Burkina Faso and risk alienating a nation that has captured the imagination of millions across Africa, or should it quietly acknowledge that the Burkinabe experiment may reveal a new dimension of democracy, one rooted not in ballots, but in bricks? The world is watching. And whether it approves or disapproves, one fact cannot be denied: the people of Burkina Faso have dared to defy the script written for them. They are building their own definition of democracy, and in doing so, they may be reshaping not only Africa's future, but the world's understanding of freedom itself. The voices of Burkina Faso citizens echo far beyond their borders. When ordinary people declare that they prefer sweat cement and solidarity over ballots and campaign speeches, the world must pause and listen. This is not simply a local dispute about elections, it is a challenge to an entire global order that has long measured democracy by procedures instead of progress. But here lies the warning. If the Burkinabe experiment succeeds, it could inspire a wave of similar movements across Africa. Politicians who depend on elections to recycle power may face rejection. Foreign governments that tie aid to ballot boxes may lose their leverage. Yet there is also risk. Without vigilance, the rejection of elections could be misused by leaders who deliver neither democracy nor development. The line between people's power and authoritarian control is thin. That is why the citizens' role remains central. They are the guardians of this movement, and their voices must never be silenced. For Americans watching this story unfold, the question cuts deep. Do we measure freedom only by the right to vote, or also by the dignity of having roads, schools, hospitals, and jobs? For decades, we have supported systems abroad that promised democracy, but delivered poverty. Now, Burkina Faso forces us to confront a painful truth. Perhaps development itself is the most radical form of democracy. And so the choice is not just for Africans, it is for all of us. Will we cling to old definitions, or will we dare to imagine a democracy built on dignity and results? The people of Burkina Faso have already made their decision. They are mixing cement paving roads and raising walls that may outlast any constitution. The future remains uncertain, but one thing is undeniable. History is being rewritten not in conference halls but on construction sites, and the hands holding the pen are not politicians, they are the hands of citizens. Do you think that President Ibrahim Traoré's national reform strategies are truly effective? Yet can we continue to trust him, or should we begin thinking of who might one day succeed him? Please share if you feel you are among the first to recognize and support this historic movement. And subscribe if you believe that the truth, however uncomfortable, is more important than headlines. Because what is happening in Burkina Faso is bigger than one man, one government, or one election. It is the birth of a new definition of democracy, one that may shape Africa's destiny and perhaps even ours.